Hi everybody, hope everyone's doing safe and is keeping themselves entertained during this time of quarantine or whatever. I think it's over now, but who knows. So fingers crossed on college starting soon because I'm bored of my mind, and yeah. Anyway, that's about me. So today we'll be focusing on jurisdiction in personam with regard to the conflict of laws. As I talked earlier and as I mentioned earlier in the previous videos, jurisdiction is something that's very important with regard to disputes brought in to the conflict of laws, especially dealing with disputes with an international element. You need to know which court has the jurisdiction over the parties involved in it. So the first step taken is jurisdiction in personam, which basically means jurisdiction over a specific person. And now when we say person, that does not only mean a specific individual. It can also mean a company registered under Register General in any country. So all of this needs to be kept in mind when we talk about jurisdiction in personam. So how does the court exercise jurisdiction over a person? Well, basically, the very first thing that happens is when a court case is filed, the claim form is sent to the defendant by the court, stating that that specific person or that defendant falls under jurisdiction of the particular court. So, with regard to jurisdiction in personam, there are specific factors which are required in order to identify that a specific person has fallen under the jurisdiction of a specific court. So there are four main factors we'll be talking about today, which is basically the presence, submission, long-arm jurisdiction, and the method of service. Now these factors are all important because of one main thing. If it is done correctly, or if it's not, the court can take up the case easily. But if it's not done in the proper manner, then the court will not have jurisdiction over a certain person. Therefore, pay close attention to these four factors. Alright, let's start off with presence. So, as I mentioned earlier, in conflicts of laws, what we basically focus on is the point of view the English courts take. So, with regard to presence, we'll be looking at the presence in view of the English courts. Now, let me remind you, when we say English courts, it includes only the courts in England, not the United Kingdom, because that's just a union of countries, such as Ireland, Wales, Scotland. So when we talk about presence in England, that only means people who are present within England. So the English courts have jurisdiction over anyone present in England, as it was seen in the case of Maharani of Baroda versus Wildstein, where the Maharani had come to a horse race in England, and then the claim form was submitted then. And similarly, in the United States, a case much like the case of Maharani of Baroda versus Wildstein, Watkin versus North American Land and Timber. This is also a case where a foreigner committed a financial crime in the United States, and the relevant courts in the states actually had jurisdiction over that person. So therefore, presence, if a person is present within a geographical territory or judicial territory of a particular court, that person will fall under the jurisdiction of that particular court. Alright, so the next method of jurisdiction is submission. Submission basically means that a person goes up to a court and states, I submit myself to the court. That is why it is called submission. When a person does that, the court has jurisdiction over such person. So it should be reminded that submission is a way where you can submit yourself even if there is no connection to England. A person may come forward to the court and say, I submit to these crimes. However, these crimes have no connection to England at all. Even in such circumstances, because the person submits himself to the English courts will have jurisdiction to try a person with regard to those crimes. So submission can take place in the following ways. Submission by agreement, where both parties agree to submit themselves to the jurisdiction of the English court. The second method being defendant appearing before the court to contest the merits of the case. If a defendant appears before the English courts and tries to defend himself, that will be considered as a submission of jurisdiction. Thirdly, the defendant instructs the solicitor to accept that basically speaks for itself. And finally, the claimant submits to recounter a claim. If a claimant submits a case and then states, alright, I want to add something more to this case, this is not the only crime that occurred, then the claimant will resubmit or recounter that specific claim, stating that these crimes need to be added to the statement I made earlier. In such a situation, the claimant himself submits himself to the court's jurisdiction. Another important factor to be considered with regard to submission is the defendant needs to be present in that court when making a submission. If not, that submission cannot be carried out. So there has been a bit of a debate regarding whether a defendant is needed when he has instructed his solicitor to accept a submission. However, most courts state that even though the solicitor accepts it, the defendant still must be present at court. And another factor which is kind of like a sub-factor, is that if all the witnesses are present in England with regard to a specific case, England would be considered as the best forum. We'll be talking about the concept of best forum when we talk about the forum non-conveniences, which we'll be doing in the next video. So, moving on to the third method of jurisdiction in personam, long-arm jurisdiction. Long-arm jurisdiction is a term which is used to refer to the ability of local courts to exercise jurisdiction over foreigners. This allows the court to hear the case and enter into binding agreements against the defendant residing outside the court's jurisdiction. For example, let's say an American comes and commits a crime here in Sri Lanka. In such a situation, what can be done about it? What laws can we apply? Are we applying American laws or are we applying Sri Lankan laws? However, this crime was committed in Sri Lanka, so we can make an agreement with the American government and state, give us an extradition order to bring him back to Sri Lanka and try him for his crimes. So that's basically long-arm jurisdiction. However, it's up to the court's discretion to either allow or not allow a claim form to be served outside its jurisdiction. So if you take the same example, if the Sri Lankan court thinks, alright, let's let America handle this crime, then the Sri Lankan courts give up the jurisdiction of being able to try this person who committed that crime. And if you take the approach of English courts, the courts can only exercise jurisdiction once a claim form is being served. That means a foreigner cannot only be taken under jurisdiction of court until a claim form has been served. And this was seen in the case of John Russell versus Kaiser, where a foreigner was not served his claim form properly, and therefore he stated that since that had not been done, he does not fall under jurisdiction of the English court. So that is another important thing to keep in mind, that the claim form has to be submitted properly in order for a court to exercise jurisdiction over such a person. Finally, we come to the methods of service. So this methods of service is also an important factor because it determines whether or not a person comes under jurisdiction barely focusing on the method the claim form has been served. It should be reminded that the methods of deliverance differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. However, there are some general principles that are required for a claim form to be served properly. So, a claim form, first of all, can be delivered to an individual, which is known as personal service. So, in such a situation, it can happen in mainly three general methods. You can hand it over to the defendant, and if the second method being if the defendant does not want to accept the claim form, you can leave it next to him. And in an extraordinary situation of partnership, you can give the claim form to any partner of the partnership in question. So those three methods are the methods of personal service, which are generally accepted worldwide. Now let's talk about sending a claim form to a company. Now this is a bit tricky, but still again it's quite simple to be understood. So the first method is serving and posting it to the registrar's office. Now in England, every organization needs to be registered with the Registrar General. So basically the person delivering this claim form has to go to Registrar General and obtain the registered address of the office, main office, and then deliver it or post it to that specific office. Now in a situation where the business main office has been closed, then it should be posted to any other place where the business still continues. And if you take in consideration a foreign company, in that situation you need to talk to Registrar General of that foreign country and obtain the registered address of that particular company, and then you can serve it or post it to them. An important case with regard to the method of service is Barclays Bank of Switzerland versus Hahn, where the defendant voluntarily and knowing that the claim form would be served to a particular address, refrains from going to that address. However, it was proved that he already knew that a claim form was on its way, and therefore totally ignored it and did not go to that particular address, because he will have to answer to the claim form if he did. So in such a situation, taking the intention of the defendant into consideration, the courts held that he was found guilty, and that he was found guilty and under jurisdiction of that specific court. So this is quite a very short and simple concept and theory, and a lesson as well. So these are the factors that need to be taken into consideration with regard to jurisdiction in personam with regard to the conflicts of law. Without this, without a proper claim form being served, or without the proper jurisdiction of the court, no court case can be taken up, especially with regard to cases with an international element, which we deal with in the conflict of laws. Therefore, this is one very important factor which we need to take into consideration and get correct. And honestly, I think this is one of the most easiest chapters in law college history. I mean, in all the subjects, because it's quite short and it's easy to understand, and it's quite easy to write answers to as well. So yep, so hopefully college will start soon and we can all hang out, chill, go to lectures, cut lectures, bunk lectures, whatever. But soon, hopefully, hoping to see you guys soon. Stay safe. Goodbye.